Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah. The second evidence brought by the author is a hadith narrated by Khawla bint Hakim, wherein she quotes the Prophet ﷺ as saying, whoever goes into a dwelling and says while entering, A'udhu bi kalimati llahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq, I seek refuge in Allah's perfect words from the evil of what He has created, no harm will befall him until he departs from that place. What is the evidence? What is the purpose of bringing this particular hadith? Well, the author is showing other options wherein one may seek refuge. That is refuge in Allah's names, right? That Allah's names and Allah's words, right? They are Allah's names and words contained in His revelation in the Quran. They are from Allah and they are ultimately uncreated. This is actually one of the proofs used by the scholars to show that the word of Allah is uncreated, because we may seek refuge in Allah's words in the Quran, and we're not allowed to seek refuge in the creation. So it's an indirect bit of evidence. There is a point which was noted, I should mention before this, that the issue of those who sought refuge with the jinn being those who have control over the jinn, is a confusion in people's minds, because you hear about people who supposedly have a jinn, and in fact some people just recently contacted me from Kashmir, where they were saying how some of their friends who used to have a clear what they thought was a clear understanding of Tawheed, etc., are now fallen into this trap, that somebody there among them has been prescribing certain du'as to make, and you repeat this thing, etc., and you'll have a jinn which comes into your service. You gain control over the jinn, will do whatever you need. So now they've gotten themselves caught up in this kind of thing, and telling people that, wait, after a year's time you see where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be able to do, and this, that, and the other. So it's become very attractive, and this is really through the materialist attraction. Success in the material world can draw people into this trap. Reality is that Muslims have no control, or non-Muslims have no control over the jinn. That even Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was unable to control the jinn. He was able to repel them, but not control them. Well-known hadith where he wanted to tie up a jinn, that had attacked him in prayer in the masjid, but then he remembered the prayer of Prophet Sulaiman, wherein he had asked that Allah gave him a dominion which He would give to no one after him, right? And that was control over the jinn. So the jinn were in the control of Prophet Sulaiman. The other point to note here is that this hadith sounds very like a number of other hadiths where Prophet ﷺ has prescribed certain things to do, and the consequence is going to be this in this life, right? Whoever seeks refuge saying A'udhu bi kalimati llahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq, that no harm will befall him until he departs from the place. But we do this, and we go in the house and still harm befalls us. We say, what happened here? Either what the Prophet ﷺ told us wasn't true, right? It doesn't work, he's given us false information, or what? Why didn't it work? If he said that you say it, no harm is going to befall you, but then you say it and go in there and harm still befalls you, what does that mean? What do you draw from that? And any other dua or instruction which Prophet ﷺ gave and prescribed a consequence, and the consequence doesn't happen. Do we say it didn't work because it wasn't true, it was a weak hadith, or we can't really attribute to the Prophet ﷺ or whatever? No. What we say is that there are factors which may inhibit a dua from working. So what we have to go and do is to ensure that those factors are removed. Because any of these kinds of dua, when we say a'udhu bi kalimati llahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq, we're calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? We're seeking refuge in His words. So we're seeking refuge in Him. And the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned a man who on the desert, his hair disheveled, raises his hands up and calls on Allah. But he said, how can Allah answer this man's prayer when the food he eats is haram? So his flesh has been grown from haram, and the drink he drinks is haram. How is Allah going to answer his prayers? So it shows here that there are inhibitive factors which can prevent a perfectly valid dua from working. So if one makes the dua and it doesn't work, we don't just say, useless dua. No, we say, what are we doing wrong? We now try to correct up our lives, remove whatever preventative factors are there, and then make the dua. That's what we do. The last chapter, chapter 14, seeking help from or calling on others besides Allah is shirk. Right? This, of course, first and foremost, is in reference to those who cannot do anything according to the cause and effect systems of the world that are known. Right? For you to call on or seek help from your classmate in doing your homework, this is not shirk. Right? If you read the title here, the title taken its generality would include that as shirk. So obviously what it's speaking about is seeking help from those who are not in a position to help you. And as I said, I added the condition that it is according to the cause and effect system which is known to us, legal. Right? Because somebody could say, well, calling on Abdul Qadir Jilani, he can help you, so therefore it's not shirk. No, because that is illegal. It's an illegal practice, and there's no clear cause and effect chain that we can put in that is known either from our experience, from legal, practical experience, or from Sharia, which would support that. Anyway, the issue of calling on in dua as being calling others besides Allah as being shirk, meaning that calling on Allah is itself worship. Right? Making dua is a form of worship, and it involves all three aspects of Tawheed. Because when one calls in worship on Allah, one is affirming Allah's existence and His dominion, that is His rububiyyah. And when one calls on Allah vocally, he is calling on Allah, he is affirming His asma wa sifat, that He hears the dua. This is one of His attributes in His name, as-Samir, right? Al-Alim. And He is also fulfilling ibadah, Tawheed al-Ibadah, because he is involved in an act of worship directed to Allah. And dua in general can be divided into two categories, what they call dua al-Ibadah and dua al-Maslaha, or Mas'ala, sorry, dua al-Mas'ala. That is dua al-Ibadah being the invocation of worship, and dua al-Mas'ala the invocation of request. Every dua of ibadah includes a dua of request, but not every dua of request is a dua of ibadah. Right? Doing acts of worship themselves imply dua al-ibadah, because when we do an act which Allah has prescribed, we are in fact we are worshipping Allah in doing it, and we are seeking the reward which comes from it. We believe that Allah is pleased by it and will reward us for it. Dua al-mas'ala is requesting what is needed and asking Allah to repel what is harmful. If that is directed to the creation who are able to help you, then it is permissible. If it's directed to creation who cannot help you, then it becomes shirk. On page 208, there are 3 elements which indicate the superiority of dua. The first, that it is the most noble act that a human being can do, making dua. There is nothing more noble in the sight of Allah than dua. This is, something that for many of us, dua becomes a ritual, which we say rapidly without really thinking about what we're saying and thinking about Allah answering it. We just go through the motions. So the Prophet ﷺ had said, when you make dua, you should do it believing that Allah will answer your prayer. But you have to do so with a conscious heart and not a playful heart. Secondly, that invocation is the best form of worship. Prophet ﷺ said the best form of worship is dua, and that it is the essence of worship. Dua huwa al-ibadah. Dua is worship. So people, with regards to making dua, may be divided into 4 basic categories. Those whose invocations or duas are to other than Allah, people involved in shirk from the get-go. Those who believe in Allah and worship Him but never ask Him anything, they're calling on saints, etc., they're also involved in shirk, but they believe in Allah. Those who believe in Allah but do not worship Him and practice invocation of request. They don't worship Him, but they may ask Him things in time of need. Right? So they don't commit themselves to worship and do whatever He tells them, but when faced with a trial, they call on Allah. And the last category are those who combine both types of invocation and direct it only to Allah. The other points of the chapter are some general evidences for calling on others beside Allah, which is or has been affirmed from the very beginning of the chapter. The verses, do not call on others besides Allah who will neither benefit you nor harm you, doesn't mean that if you call on others besides Allah who will benefit you and could harm you, it's okay. Right? This who will neither benefit you nor harm you is not a condition but a description. Those who you call on besides Allah, they cannot benefit you or harm you. That's what that statement actually means. For if you did, then you would be among the wrongdoers. If Allah touches you with some harm, none can remove it besides Him. And if He wishes good for you, none can prevent His favors. He gives it to whomever of His servants He wishes, and He is the oft-forgiving, the most merciful. So, stressing here again, not to call on others besides Allah, because in doing so, you're involved in shirk. The other verse, repeating basically the same thing, Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 17, what you worship besides Allah are only idols, and you are creating falsehood. Indeed, those who you worship besides Allah cannot provide provision for you, so seek your provision from Allah, worship Him, and be grateful to Him, for your return is to Him. And the third verse, and who is more astray than one who calls on others besides Allah, from Surah Al-Ahqaf, verse 5, who cannot answer him until the day of resurrection, and who are unaware of his prayers. And the fourth verse from Surah An-Naml, verse 62, is not he better than your God, who responds to the distress when he calls on him, he who removes evil and he who makes you inheritors of the land? Is there any other God along with Allah? They reflect very little. All of these verses basically stressing that only Allah can answer the prayers, really showing logically why you shouldn't be calling on others besides Allah. And of course, if one does so, it is shirk. The last hadith found in Tabarani: indeed, help should not be sought from me, help should only be sought from Allah. This is a very strong phrase which could be used to refute those who call on the Prophet ﷺ. However, the hadith is daif. It's not authentic. So you really can't use it for an argument. It has a particular individual in it, Ibn Lahi'a, who is a known weak narrator. Other than that, in the chapter, there just is a point on page 215 to 16 worth reflecting on as to what constitutes gratitude, because Allah said, so seek your provision from him, worship him, and be grateful to him. And this is an element of worship. Gratitude to Allah is an element of worship, but gratitude should be not just with the heart, right? Where one recognizes in the heart Allah's favor, but that is a part of it. It should start there, but it should also be expressed in the tongue. You thank those who help you. You thank Allah verbally. And it should also be displayed by the actions of the limbs. So everything should be involved in thanking Allah. We display it in the actions of the limbs by sharing the favors which Allah has given us, by doing good for others as Allah did good for us. That is gratitude in its completeness. So that covers basically our syllabus. You have the remaining questions which will guide you to the most important areas to focus on. It doesn't mean that questions may not come from outside of these specific ones, but these are the main areas that will be focused on in the questions in the exam. That's what this actually means. Are there any questions before we? I guess there aren't any. One should keep in mind the vow which is to other than Allah, this is shirk. But a vow in which a person disobeys Allah is not necessarily shirk. A vow to other than Allah is shirk, and it involves a vow to disobedience to Allah. But not every vow to disobedience to Allah, which involves disobedience to Allah, is shirk. Right? You have a general and a specific. A vow which involves disobedience to Allah may not involve shirk at all. It's just doing something which is not pleasing to Allah. It goes against what Allah has prescribed. Right? You vow you're going to kill somebody. Somebody's done something, so you vow, by Allah, I'm going to kill this person. For what he did to my mother, or did to my father, or did to my this, or whatever. Now this is a vow of disobedience to Allah. Because murder is haram. But it's not a vow of shirk. You're still swearing by Allah. So you see, your vow of disobedience involves swearing by Allah. Right? This is what distinguishes it from your vow of shirk. Vow of shirk, you're swearing by other than Allah. Okay? In chapter 12, the author brings from Surah Al-Insan, يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. They fulfill their vows and fear a day whose evil will be widespreading. This is brought as evidence that vowing to other than Allah is shirk. Why? Because Allah mentions that fulfilling their vows, this is sort of like a command to fulfill their vows, describing the believers as those who fulfill their vows. There's another verse in Surah Al-Hajj, verse 29, where Allah says, وَلْيُوفُوا نُذُورَهُمْ. Let them fulfill their vows. So, vowing is an act of worship. If Allah has commanded it, it is an act of worship. He describes the believers as fulfilling their vows, it's an act of worship. Therefore, if it is done, any act of worship done to other than Allah is shirk. So therefore, vowing to other than Allah is shirk. Then he also brings from Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّن نَفَقَةٍ أَوْ نَذَرْتُم مِّن نَذْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُهُ وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِنْ أَنصَارٍ. And whatever funds you spend or vow you make, certainly Allah knows it, and the sinful will not have any helpers. So the key here is linking this vowing to Allah's knowledge. It implies here that there is reward and punishment in it. Right? So therefore, this is additional evidence for it being worship. To do so to other than Allah then becomes shirk. Then he brings a hadith from Aisha found in Sahih al-Bukhari, right? He said it is narrated in the Sahih. Actually, this terminology is not precise. As you will take next semester in Usul al-Hadith or Ulum al-Hadith, to refer to the Sahih is ambiguous. Because the Sahih, there are a number of texts which have been called the Sahih. You have Sahih Bukhari, you have Sahih Muslim, you have Sahih Ibn al-Khuzaymah, and you have other texts which are called Sahih. So this terminology is actually, according to the Hadith scholars, not precise. Right? It is true because it does come in Sahih al-Bukhari, right? And it is a Sahih Hadith. So in a general sense, you could say it, but in terms of an academic sense, it is not a very precise term. One should say really in Sahih al-Bukhari or in an authentic hadith, in a hadith sahih from Aisha, etc. Right? So the hadith is from the Prophet ﷺ saying, whoever vows that he will be obedient to Allah, he should be obedient to him. You make a vow, you must fulfill it. And whoever made a vow that he will disobey Allah, he should not disobey him. In other words, he should break the vow wherein he has vowed to disobey Allah, right? Or do something displeasing to Allah. And there are a number of examples. Ibn Abbas narrated that while the Prophet ﷺ was delivering a sermon, he saw a man standing. So he asked him, why? He asked about him, why was he standing? The people said, his name was Abu Israel. And they explained that he had vowed that he will stand and never sit down. And that he would never stand in the shade, nor would he talk to anyone, and that he would fast. This is a vow he made. Prophet ﷺ said, instruct him to speak, to come in the shade and to sit down, but let him complete his fast. Right? The one part of the vow which was something pleasing to Allah, he said complete it, the rest, break it. Right? Another occasion, Ibn Umar related that his father had asked the Prophet ﷺ, O Messenger of Allah, I vowed to perform i'tikaf in Al-Masjid al-Haram during the pre-Islamic period. So he's wondering, because of course in the pre-Islamic period, he was involved in worshipping idols. Right? And his case was, one which, when you read about what Umar ibn al-Khattab, what state he had reached in terms of his worship of false gods. On one occasion, the companions had seen him laugh and then cry. And they asked him, why did he do that? And he said that he remembered in the time of ignorance when he had an idol made out of dates. And one day he got real hungry. And he ate a piece of his idol. So he just sat and laughed when he thought back how silly he was, And that was his idol that he worshipped. He ate a piece of it. Right. Then he said he cried when he remembered burying his daughter alive. And while he was burying her, some dust had gotten in his beard. So she was brushing the dust from his beard, out of his beard, as he put her in the grave and covered her alive. That's the state of ignorance. Anyway, he had made this vow during that state when he was worshipping his god of dates to do i'tikaf in Masjid al-Haram. They used to make this kind of vows because they had the idols all around the masjid at the time. So he of course had doubts about fulfilling such a vow. The Prophet ﷺ said, fulfill it. Because i'tikaf, now he's a Muslim, issues of idolatry are finished. Doing i'tikaf in Masjid al-Haram is a good thing, pleasing to Allah. So he said, fulfill it. On another occasion, another companion had said to the Prophet ﷺ, my sister vowed to perform Hajj, but she died before fulfilling it. The Prophet ﷺ had said or asked, would you have paid her debts if she had any? And he replied, yes. So the Prophet ﷺ said, so pay Allah's debts, as he is more entitled to receive his rights. Right? And in general, if one finds a better option, you make a vow to do something, and then you find something better, a better vow that you can make, then it is okay to give up that vow and do the better act, or to make a better vow. Right? And there's a hadith with regarding that. Abdurrahman ibn Samurah quoted the Prophet ﷺ as saying, O Abdurrahman, don't seek to be a ruler, for if you are given authority without asking for it, Allah will aid you. But if you are given it due to asking, then you will be held responsible for it. And if you take an oath and later find something better, then do what is better and make expiation for your oath. Right? Chapter 13 deals with seeking refuge in other than Allah. It is shirk. Seeking refuge is an act of worship in and of itself. Why? We know that because in the Quran, in Surah 36, we have Allah saying, وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. And if an evil whisper from Satan diverts you, seek refuge in Allah. This is a command. Allah commands us to seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, He is the all-hearer, the all-knower. So if He has commanded us to do anything again, it must be an act of worship. So therefore, to do so to other than Allah or for other than Allah becomes shirk. The example given from Surah Al-Jinn, وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ رِجَالٌ مِّنَ الْإِنسِ يَعُوذُونَ بِالرِّجَالٍ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ فَزَادُوهُمْ رَهَقًا. And indeed there were men among humankind who sought refuge with men from among the jinn, but they only increased them in fear. It was the practice of the Arabs whenever they came into a valley, they would seek the protection of the jinn who ruled that valley, and would make certain sacrifices to them, and make amulets in their names, etc. And the jinn would do certain things for them, because with a human being who is more noble than the jinn, submitting himself, lowering himself in humility to the jinn, they like this, it makes them feel proud or whatever, and they will do things to keep that relationship going.